Not what we normally talk about, but they were funny. So last week, was it only last week? Well, it was really the week before last. I flew to Nashville and drove with Julie out to Albuquerque. And while we were driving, we were listening to a book. And I would love to tell you what the name of that book was, but I have no clue. I think it's called Unbroken, but I'm not quite sure. And it's the story of a man who was an Olympic runner, and he was a navigator, I believe, on a B-24 bomber, and they were shot down, and they were adrift on a life raft in the Pacific. And this book it's a great book to listen to in the car. I'm not sure I would have ever been able to read as much because of the detail. It's very, very detailed. These guys were adrift. They didn't know where they were. They didn't know where they were going to end up. You know, they had an idea of where their plane had left, and they knew where their plane was supposed to go. But in that moment, they had no clue where they were. And sometimes that happens to us in life. We know where we started from, and we kind of maybe know where we're going, but we get adrift. And so we've been talking for the last several weeks about returning home. In the first week, I talked about returning home to the changeless, to God who never changes. And last week, Paulette just did this marvelous talk on returning home to peace. It was a wonderful talk. And so I did not have returning home to commitment in my list of things to return home to. But this week is World Day of Prayer. And Unity has this World Day of Prayer, and this year Silent Unity is celebrating 125 years of prayer around the clock. In this World Day of Prayer, churches all around the world are celebrating, Unity churches are celebrating this World Day of Prayer. We will be celebrating it here this Thursday. On your chair, when you came in, there was a little prayer request slip. And if you put your prayer request on that, we will be holding them in prayer, and then we will again send them to Silent Unity. And you are invited to come and be a part of our World Day of Prayer celebration. It begins at 1 o'clock. Here in this room, we will have meditation from 1 a.m. to 1 a.m. No, not from 1 a.m. From 1 p.m. after lunch, from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. And at the beginning of every hour, there'll be a guided meditation, and then the rest of the time will be in the silence. And at 6:30, we have a service, and our service is about a commitment to peace. So there is some woven thread through all of this. And Maggie's done this wonderful job. And we have this wonderful declaration that we're going to be making together at 6:30. That we are responsible for the future of life on earth. And as a Spirit-led faith community, these are the things that we're going to do. And so we would love for you to be here at 6:30 to make that declaration with us. Because I know that whatever we declare, whatever we set into motion, comes about. I remember the first year I was at Unity of Melbourne, and I wrote down what my needs were in a new building. It took 16 years, but we're in a new building. What we declare, what we hold on to, becomes a real and present reality. And so that's how I got to today's question, this talk about returning home to a commitment. Now, have any of you seen the insurance advertisement on television where they give people little magnetic words and they put them on the walls, and they have the past and they have the future, and yellow things are positive and blue things might be things that we might call less than positive, maybe an illness or something. And what they showed is that people, by far and large, the future wall is almost all yellow. But yet the past wall is yellow and blue. It's got just as much blue as it's got yellow. And that is a real truth. And they're trying to tell you to buy insurance. And in a way, I'm trying to sell you some insurance too. I didn't think about it until just this minute. Because life is about change right here where we are right now. Tomorrow, it's not going to be the same. Something's going to happen to somebody. Somebody's going to get a diagnosis. Somebody's going to... My granddaughter lost her wallet last week and couldn't pay her rent and had to come borrow money from Grandma. Something happens. The biggest lesson I've learned while I've been the minister here at Unity of Melbourne is that change is going to happen. And it's going to happen to me, and it's going to happen to you. And so if you and I can get really clear about what we are committed to, that will help us when that change comes. In 1993, a ministerial class started World Day of Prayer out of this idea. And it was so interesting to me that the year after the World Trade Center bombing, that World Day of Prayer fell on September 11th. And what I know is that prayer works. It works in every situation. And I know that what we think and what we declare and what we commit to works. So I want to submit to you that one of the ways that you can handle change in your life is by what you commit to, what you agree to, what you declare in your personal life. And when I was getting ready for today, two scriptures came to my mind. The first scripture was from Romans 7:15 from Paul, and he said, I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, haven't we all been in that situation where we find ourselves saying the things that we don't want to say, doing the things we don't want to do? When I sound like my mom. My mom was a wonderful woman, and I don't know why I don't sound like her being wonderful. The other scripture was from Matthew 5:37, which Jesus was saying, let your yes be yes and your no be no. So what are you saying yes to? What are you saying no to? That's my thought for today. What are we committing to? What are we coveting with? What do we do when we make a declaration? And in all of this, I believe that we are committing to know our higher self, to know our God self, to be one with God, to follow the voice of God that comes through us, to listen, to pause, to stop, to be still, to stop talking long enough to hear the voice of God. There was a teacher who was very influential in the New Thought religions. Her name was Emma Curtis Hopkins. Have any of you ever read any of Emma Curtis Hopkins? She wrote two books, at least two books. One of them was Scientific Christian Mental Practice, and the other one was High Mysticism. And I've never been able to get through either one of them. But she lived in the late 1800s, and she was a student of Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Sciences. But Emma Curtis Hopkins was the teacher of teachers. She taught Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founders of Unity. She taught Ernest Holmes, who was the founder of religious science. She taught Emily Cady, who wrote the book Talks on Truth. Not Talks on Truth, Lessons in Truth. And here's an interesting fact. When Emma Curtis Hopkins was 15, she was sent to Woodstock Academy in Connecticut. And because she was so smart, because she was such a genius, she was made a teacher. And she gave all those great metaphysicians that we study and we go to these churches, she gave them a foundation. And I want to read you some words from Emma Curtis Hopkins. We have unlimited power. If we do not use that power, it does not alter the fact that it is our inheritance. We have unlimited wisdom. If we don't draw upon it, that does not alter its being ours. And so if you and I were to add to that, we have unlimited light. But if we don't shine, it doesn't mean the bulb's burned out. We have unlimited health. But if we don't experience it, it does not alter the fact that it's ours to have. We have unlimited joy, abundance, peace, balance, and harmony. But if we don't express these things, it doesn't alter the fact that they are our truth and they're our divine birthright. And so, when we don't experience those things, why is that? This is what Emily Curtis Hopkins said. Between you and your power, between you and your wisdom, between you and your light, between you and your health, between you and your joy, abundance, peace, balance, and harmony, all of which belong to you and all of which you ought to experience, is your idea of the absence of them. Between you and your power and wisdom and light and health and joy and abundance and peace and balance and harmony, all of that which belongs to us, what's between us and that is our own idea of the absence of them, our belief in the absence of them. And it's not just necessarily our personal belief, because we have some collective beliefs. Now, I don't know if some of you are old enough to remember that at one time there was a disease we didn't say its name. We would say, the C word, the big C, because at that time there was no cure. Unless it was a miracle cure. And today, it's a fact of life. We know that people have things that we call cancer. And we know that it has different effects with different people. And it's not that word. I mean, none of us want to hear that word. But it is not verboten to speak anymore. We talk about it. We raise money to cure it because we believe that we can. So that's what has to happen. We have to believe. We have to commit to believe in joy and peace and wisdom and abundance and harmony. When you leave this morning, I have a handout that I have copied for you. I'm going to invite you to make your own personal commitment declaration. But I have a handout, and on one side is Charles and Myrtle Fillmore's commitment. On the 7th day of December in 1892, this is what they said. We, Charles Fillmore and Myrtle Fillmore, husband and wife, hereby dedicate ourselves, our time, our money, all we have and all we expect to have to the Spirit of truth, and through it to the Society of Silent Unity. It being understood and agreed that the said Spirit of truth shall render unto us an equivalent for this dedication in peace of mind, health of body, wisdom, understanding, love, life, and abundant supply of all things necessary to meet every want, without our making any of these things the object of our existence. In the presence of the conscious mind of Jesus Christ, this 7th day of December, 1892. That was their dedication, their covenant. That was their affirmation that they wrote and they read. On the back of it, from Chris Chenoweth, I have printed a declaration of financial freedom, which he suggests that you use 3 times a day. And you could take this and change it to be a declaration of health freedom, a declaration of peace freedom. It starts as, I am the source of all wealth. You could start it, I am the source of all health. I am the source of all peace. I am the source of all joy. I am the source of all love. I am rich with creative ideas. It works for all of those. My mind abounds with new, original, inspired thoughts. My value is beyond reckoning. What I say, what I believe, what I decree, the value of that is beyond reckoning. So those are there for you to take home after service. I thought about the people who have made decrees and who've made commitments in their life. And I was looking for stories or trying to think of a story I'd told before, and I couldn't help but remember the Brooklyn Bridge. How many of you remember the story about the Brooklyn Bridge? It was built in 1883, and it was an engineering miracle. And I'm going to tell you why. John Roebling was inspired for the idea of the Brooklyn Bridge. And he took his idea to all of the great engineers of the day. And they said, no way, it can't be done. They told the bankers who were going to finance the project, can't be done. But John Roebling believed in the idea of the Brooklyn Bridge. He believed in the idea of the Brooklyn Bridge. He believed in the idea. And so finally he got funding to go ahead. And he convinced his son, Washington Roebling, who was an up-and-coming engineer, to work on the bridge. He convinced his son that the bridge could be built. And the two of them conceived of how it was going to happen, and what they were going to do, and how they were going to overcome all the obstacles. And financing was arranged, and they got started. With unharnessed excitement and energy, they hired a crew, and they began to build their dream bridge. The project was only a few months underway when there was a tragic on-site accident. John Roebling was killed. And his son Washington was critically injured. And so everybody said, well, the bridge won't be built. I said, no way. Washington Roebling prayed to God. And he still believed. And he worked out a method. Here is a person who could not move and who could not talk. He could move one finger. He worked out a code with his wife of tapping that one finger. She put her arm under his finger, and he tapped out what had to be done. People would visit and say, you have to give up on your dream. You can't talk, you can't walk, you can't move. No one else in the world knows how to build this bridge. How can you still expect to build it? No other engineer in the story, it says, on the planet knew how to build the bridge except for his finger and his sharp mind. It took 13 years of communicating with code to his wife how to build the Brooklyn Bridge. And he did it. And the Brooklyn Bridge is still there. A commitment to an idea, a commitment to a truth, a tap at a time. The other story I found about how important it is what we have a belief in. You know, there was no absence of belief in building that bridge in Washington Roebling's mind. And now I'm going to tell you a story about a little boy who, in his mind, there was no absence of belief about his ability to run a race. His name is Joey, and his mother is Kathy Lumenkusa. I can't even say it. But when he was born, his feet were twisted upward, and he had what is called club feet. And when he was a baby, he had to have all these surgeries and had to have cast. And he spent the first 3 years of his life in surgery and cast and braces. His legs were massaged, they were worked, and they were exercised. But by the time he was 7 or 8 years old, they looked pretty good. And his mom says that they would go to amusement parks or go to the park and they would walk. And he would get tired and they would stop and sit down and have a soda and talk about what they'd seen. She said, I never told him that his legs did not work. I never told him that the doctor said you'd never be able to do this. She said the children in the neighborhood would run around and play, and that he wanted to join them, and he did. She said, I never told him that he couldn't run and play. In the 7th grade, he decided to go out for the track team. And his parents thought, oh gosh, this may be the time. She said, but we didn't tell him. She said he'd go every day and he would run. She said, I think he worked harder than anybody else. She said one day he had a fever of 102 and he insisted on going to school because he had track that afternoon. She said, I expected a call all day long from the school sending him home. She said after school, when school was out, I drove to the school thinking that he would be ready to come home. He wouldn't want to run. And she said, there he was running. And she said, I drove by him as he ran in this neighborhood. His eyes were glassy. And she said, I asked him how he was. And he said, I only have 2 more miles to go. She said, we never told him he couldn't run 4 miles. We didn't tell him, so he didn't know. 2 weeks later, the day before the second to the last race of the season, the names of the team runners were called, and Joey was number 6 on the list. Joey had made the team. He was in the 7th grade. The other 6 team members were all 8th graders. We never told him he probably shouldn't expect to make the team. We never told him he couldn't do it, so he didn't know. He just did it. in our lives, there's going to be changes, there's going to be things that happen, and we're going to think, oh no, I can't. In a little way, I understand this adrift thing right now because we've moved into this big building. Our electricity bills, almost $3,000. Oh my God. How am I going to do it? So, and things keep coming up. Just thank God for Gerald. Gerald's my husband, and he's helping with the construction. And Tom and the board, Barbara, all of the board has been just, Suzette, all of you have been so strong, and I appreciate that because I do feel a little adrift in the midst. So I wrote my own covenant last night. I, Beth, had covenant with the God of my being to bring forth into manifestation the following ideals. Unity of Melbourne is a vibrant, dynamic, loving community where people are called to experience their oneness with God and with each other, where people are called into their authentic magnificence and invited, encouraged, and supported to spread their wings to fly. And as they do that, they automatically support, invite, and encourage others to do the same. As they do that, they become mentors to others, officially or unofficially. Unity of Melbourne is bustling with energy and excitement and feels the powerful presence of God in every activity, in every interaction, in everything we do together. People are upheld in times of sorrow and uplifted in times of joy. We are a community that cares for one another, and we take collective responsibility for making sure that no one is left outside the circle of love. And I, Beth, have all the love, strength, spiritual depth, humility, and personal integrity to have the honor and profound privilege to be the spiritual leader of this group. I covenant with the God of my being to let the action of divine love and divine mind bring these ideals into being. And so it is. So this afternoon or this week, when something's going on and when you start feeling adrift, can you sit down and figure out where your covenant is, where your commitment is, what you're going to believe in, so that you can have that feeling that you too have come home.